Interested in how you guys think the president is doing.
I'm absolutely impressed with it. I mean, the guy has guts.
Shameful, unqualified, disastrous. Somebody, if we have problems, is throwing gasoline on a fire to address them.
The thing negative that I could say about him, I mean, I'm just trying to think, there's so many. I was like, which one do I pick?
He's a bully. He tweets more than anybody I've ever seen in my life. Like a petulant child sometimes.
But this man's 70, honey. If he wants to tweet, let him.
I'm a millennial. I'm probably going to be a forever renter. I feel sometimes there's just no way to get ahead, you know, and I've always been a hard worker. I've been grinding it out now for 5 years.
Is the war in Iran causing prices to go up?
Absolutely.
Oh, definitely. But is it a good thing? Oh, yes, finally.
Hello and welcome to a slightly different episode of TrumpWorld. I'm Anushka Asthana. I'm in Washington, D.C., but I have just got back from Georgia, a critical swing state where I've been listening to what people think, including about Donald Trump. And here's the thing, loads of people outside of Washington, D.C. still love the president. We really heard that on the ground in Georgia. Despite everything, despite rising petrol prices, despite all the allegations of corruption and money making by himself and his family while in office, despite the Iran war, so many people just absolutely adore Donald Trump. Although I should say, plenty of them detested him too. I think this must be one of the most divisive political leaders certainly I have ever come across. Now, I'm joined today by Seb Wride, who is the head of opinion research for Public First, the pollsters who have been working with us and have carried out a national poll, but also let us delve deeper by listening into a focus group in Georgia. And one thing that I was really fascinated about was in the national poll, they asked people to score between 0 and 10. How do you think Donald Trump is doing? And 33% of people, 1 in 3, gave the president a 0 out of 10. While 12% of them, still pretty significant, 1 in 8, gave him a perfect 10 out of 10. I mean, just incredibly divisive. How is all of this, in your opinion, going to feed into those midterm elections?
Well, I think these results and what we saw in Georgia reflects the way that Americans feel about Donald Trump pretty clearly. They are tending towards extreme responding on some of these things. They have quite sticky views of him. The thing that this midterm election will do is really test that Trump power, that Trump brand power, because we have Trump candidates winning the primaries on the basis of his endorsements. There's been a couple of exceptions, but heading into the midterms, we're going to see whether that endorsement still carries strength when it comes to actual runoffs against Democrats. And that'll be the critical thing.
And obviously, to look into this, I mentioned the focus group we did in Georgia. And at one point in that focus group, your colleague, Ed, actually asked the room the same question that had been asked to the national poll. He got them to score Donald Trump out of 10.
So 10, most positive, 0, most negative. How would you rate Trump's performance since taking office?
Okay. You've all got the other numbers? What I would like you to do is turn them round and face them towards me, please. But hold them with both hands so that it's clear.
Now, if you're listening to this, I can tell you that there was a 0, there were 2 4s. Our room was slightly more generous to Donald Trump than the national poll, but 3 women held up 10 out of 10. It's really interesting to me that at the same time as we're seeing things like that, Seb, we're also saying he's the most unpopular president ever. I mean, both of those things are true, right?
Yeah, both these things are true. And I think that group shows precisely why they're true. I mean, these people, when they were talking in this group about Donald Trump, they weren't giving responses that sounded like 10 out of 10s. And they weren't really giving responses that sounded like 0 out of 10s. But as soon as you would sort of talk about the abstract level, let's talk about Donald Trump, people tend to those extreme answers, I suppose. And that's what we see as a disconnect between how they talk about Trump's actions and what Trump's doing, and then Trump himself as a figure.
Well, let's try to listen in to why they said they felt that way.
But thinking about the Trump administration more broadly, interested in how you guys think the president is doing. Is he doing better or worse than you expected?
No, I'm absolutely impressed with it. I mean, the guy has guts. People just don't like the way he says things, but somebody had to. Yeah, they don't like it, but I don't care about that. I care about the results.
Correct. He's doing stuff and people don't like it, but somebody needed to. But the thing that thrills me the most about Trump as president is that he's running this country like it's a company, a business.
Shameful, unqualified, disastrous. Somebody, if we have problems, is throwing gasoline on a fire to address them. I'd also say, I don't want a country run by a businessman because they're out of touch with the people. We are not a corporation, we're a nation.
I could say a few things. Again, I didn't vote for him. I voted for Kamala Harris, but I do give him credit when credit is due. He is able to kind of take the bull by the horn, and if he believes something, he will do it. But that's one of the reasons why I didn't vote for him, because I think he's too impulsive and not disciplined. Again, the thing negative that I could say about him, I'm just trying to think. There's so many. I was like, which one do I pick?
He's a bully. Some of the stuff I agree. In the end, you don't need someone soft running the country. I don't disagree with that. But you gotta have a certain decorum about how you conduct yourself when you represent the country. Some of the stuff, he just seems like he literally just does not care, and he knows no one can do anything about it. And it's kind of a slap in the face to me. He tweets more than anybody I've ever seen in my life. This man is 70 plus years old and he's tweeting all the time. I'm like, why are you tweeting? Stop tweeting. Don't tweet. I don't even like people that tweet, to be honest with you. So it's so nerve wracking that he seems so like a petulant child sometimes.
He's intense, and he does a lot of stuff that upsets people, and I get it. But this man's 70, honey. If he wants to tweet, let him.
So just to say who there was in the room, there was quite a spread of people. All of the three women who really loved Trump were retired, although different ages within that. The oldest was 81. There was a guy, Andrew, who was an independent voter who leaned Democrat, who absolutely detested the president. And then there was a security guard, and then there was a guy who was working two jobs, which we're going to come back to, Michael, who were more reasonable in the way they were describing him. But I have to say, I got the impression that they didn't love things about him. The things that I think that they found quite difficult, one of them said was the way that Donald Trump speaks, his manner, the way he tweets as well. How do you think that affects how people feel about him?
I think it's such a critical part of who Donald Trump is and the way that Donald Trump acts that, in a way, as with many things that the president has done and does, it's baked in to the way that they think about him. So actually, it's not like a specific tweet or a specific Truth Social post is really going to change views for or against him, as far as we can tell. That's just part of who he is and what he represents. So I think it's interesting that people in this group were talking about it, and it's one of the things that first came to mind. But I guess in part it reflects that Trump is such a character, and the character is larger than the policies themselves, that actually people don't tend to a conversation about policy and what Trump has done. They tend to a conversation about who Trump is and how he acts. And I think it shows that we're really in a situation where people are talking about the politician, I suppose, rather than the politics.
Very much so. One of the women we just heard from, Kim, we heard her say that she loves the fact that he's a businessman. And I have to say, going around the country, I've heard this come up quite a lot, this idea he's a businessman so he can get deals done. I mean, obviously, the Iran deal doesn't look so good to a lot of experts. Do you think that's going to damage that part of his reputation?
I think the details and the specifics of the Iran deal will probably be something that gets pulled out in the messaging around it, rather than, people aren't going to sift through that deal and see, do they think it's a good deal? They're going to hear what people say about the deal. And obviously there are going to be people who are invested in saying very positive things and people who are invested in saying very negative things when it comes to that deal. The thing that Iran could do, though, is if the impacts of Iran start to spread further into the year, spread into the midterms, I'm talking about the economic impacts, it's going to become quite difficult to justify the position that we currently find Republicans are in, where they would say this was a worthwhile expenditure. Will it still feel like a worthwhile expenditure in 3 to 4 months' time? I think that will be the critical thing that Iran could change.
And actually, we're going to hear a bit more about what they think about Iran overall and whether they think it is worth it. But just before we get there, have we ever had a president who is this divisive?
I think the easy answer is no. I mean, Trump is undeniably a divisive figure, and the approval ratings that you'll often see of Trump and historic political figures sometimes mask what's happening underneath, which is people picking strongly approve and strongly disapprove, and that's what we see a lot of when it comes to Donald Trump. I mean, as you said, in the group and in the poll, we see people picking zeros and tens on a 0 to 10 scale. That doesn't put him in this position of being historically divisive. It sets a ceiling and a floor to his approval ratings, where actually, even as they tick down and up, there's always this group of people who don't seem to shift that much in both directions. The recent era has been so heavily defined by Donald Trump, by who he is, his opposition as well. The Democrats are not, it's not just Republicans saying, I really, really like Trump. It's Democrats saying, I really, really don't like Trump. It can therefore be quite hard for us to separate whether what's happened in the last 10 years of American politics represents a permanent change that will be here for the next 20, 30 years, or just a flash in the pan Trump era that was defined by a very divisive figure, but will return to normality, so to speak, in a few years' time.
You know, while we were in Georgia, I got a message from someone in the UK, a kind of political contact actually, who was saying, oh, is Trump a goner? And I was like, oh, has something happened? I was checking the news. I didn't know what they were talking about. And I think they just assumed that because of all the headlines about his unpopularity, because they see Iran as unpopular, that it had had a huge and damaging effect on Donald Trump. When you're sitting outside of DC, you see a completely different story to that. Do you think there is a bit of wishful thinking when it comes to the midterms among those who oppose him?
I think there's an element of that, and there's like, if we're talking about the global perceptions of Trump, I mean, there is an element of disbelief that someone like Trump could navigate what seems to be constant sort of difficult political positions and sort of confusing messaging and challenging things to get around, like the Iran conflict. I mean, you know, as someone who's currently speaking from London, like, you can imagine Starmer or Andy Burnham having to navigate a situation like that. It would be very difficult for them. They would have immense amounts of media pressure, and how would they respond to that? Probably not the way that Trump does. So there's an element of wishful thinking, but I think there's also an element of misunderstanding exactly what American politics is like at the moment, where this stickiness really doesn't go. Like, you put Trump's name on a policy, and about half of the public will turn against it, and about half of the public will fall in behind it. And that is the impact that Trump has. Other political leaders around the world really don't seem to have that same pull and push factor when it comes to their impact on how people think about these things.
But there is one thing that I think could be a problem for Donald Trump, and I've heard this in Georgia, but also elsewhere in the country, and that is the economy. Have a listen to this.
How would you describe the state of the country at the moment? What are the things that are going well? What are the things that are going badly?
Badly is immigration, for sure.
Oh, gosh, that's everywhere. You know, it really affected the entire country in some way or another. And to straighten it out, it's going to take a lot.
It's a huge morass that's going to take them 20 years to fix what they did in 3.
Okay, we'll get into immigration in a sec. Rocco, do you want to have any other top issues that really jump out to people at the moment?
The economy. Yeah, it's just ridiculous. You know, housing alone is just ridiculous, and it's getting more and more ridiculous. So that's my number one topic.
I think that vacation rentals are why housing is so expensive, personally. Because everybody, instead of renting, they're like, oh, I can make more money and only rent it for 2 weekends a month. So they don't rent their house at a reasonable rate. If you want to go rent it, you have to pay what you would pay for a hotel all month. It's ridiculous.
And property taxes go up every single year.
That's because people don't realize what they're voting for.
Right.
Okay. Serena, what about you? What are the biggest issues you think?
I'm along with them in terms of the immigration, but I can see where housing is also an issue, especially we're at a point where people are having to make a decision. Is it cheaper to buy a house or is it better to rent? And then if I decide to purchase a house while I'm renting, can I actually afford to actually be in that middle cycle? So I think that there's a whole community that's getting lost there in the middle.
Okay, Santana, what about you?
I would say gas prices.
Okay. Any other issues that we've talked about? Immigration, we've talked about cost of living, gas and housing. Are those the big issues, or are there any other?
Corruption in government seems to be an ongoing.
Medical. Medical is huge. It's ridiculous the hoops you have to jump through to get medical care here. Whether you have coverage or you don't have coverage, they can diagnose you and you still gotta wait. all the way to here before we can actually, and I'm like, okay, well, what do they do in the meantime? So, and it's like for our elderly, no respect, and the mentally impaired, it's just crazy.
There is a huge, and has been for the last 5-10 years, huge mental health epidemic. We don't have enough resources in this country anywhere to treat all the people with mental health issues.
So far, I think we hit healthcare, inflation, economy, housing, and political corruption. I can't think of anything else. I think those are all the biggies.
Well, let's focus a little bit more on affordability then. If you don't mind me asking, how has that impacted you personally?
I can speak. I work 2 jobs. I run that IT service desk, and then on weekends, I'm doing the online orders. So the cost about affordability and buying a house and all that other stuff. I'm 39 years old. I think I'm a millennial. I'm probably going to be a forever renter because it's just unattainable with the current climate that we're in. And, all the other things that I think we were alluding to, which, the cost of gas and everything else kind of rising, healthcare costs, housing, it's the corruption. I feel sometimes there's just no way to get ahead, and I've always been a hard worker, just kind of put your head down and just grind it out. But I've been grinding it out now for 5 years.
I don't know many people that don't have 2 jobs. That's like the norm.
Yeah, the wages aren't keeping up with what the cost of living is these days.
No one's mentioned the war in Iran. How much of an issue is that?
Well, the war in Iran is the reason the gas prices is high. That was common knowledge. I mean, it's a big reason a lot of this stuff is the way it is now. I mean, I knew it eventually I was going to come up, but yeah, of course, that automatically raised everything.
I'm interested if other people agree with that. Kenneth is saying that's why.
If we agree about what?
About if that is the war in Iran causing prices to go up?
Absolutely.
Oh, definitely. But is it a good thing? Oh, yes, finally.
Well, I just think the war in Iran needed to happen, just my opinion. Granted, they're building the bomb is not going to affect us here in the States because it doesn't have that big of a reach at this point. But it does affect everyone in Europe and all that. And we're all part of the same organization. What is it, NATO or not NATO, whatever, the GS summit, something.
UN. United Nations.
We're all part of the UN. And just because we have the strongest military.
Wait, are we?
We're pissing away all our
No, are we?
rights.
No,
I don't know if I'm
are we
allowed to
part of
say
the
that.
UN?
We still are.
Okay.
They keep threatening to leave, but no, it hasn't happened yet.
All right.
But because we have such a giant military, and we do help support the military across the world, with that's how come we were the ones that helped support that.
Interested to hear some other people's views on the war in Iran. Sabrina, what do you think?
I really don't have too many views on it. I do feel that sometimes we need to kind of stick to ourselves and not actually help everybody, because sometimes it causes more pressure on us over here. And then it takes a while for us to get back to our normalcy after that. So I think that sometimes we jump into things that we shouldn't, and sometimes we need to.
Okay, thank you. Stephanie, what about you? What are your views on the war in Iran?
Well, like he said, it's been going on for a very long time, and we've been listening to the threats. And the fact that they had reached a point where, they could follow through with those threats, believe me, Europe should be jumping in a lot more because they're going to get it first.
So, Seb, I found this section really interesting, and it does speak to what we see in national polls, which is there is this shift away from Trump among particularly working class voters. And, actually, the day after the focus group, I went and joined Michael, who you heard talk about having 2 jobs. He's a millennial, he's struggling. I joined him leaving a job which he'd worked from 7 a.m. till 4 p.m. in the afternoon. I got in the car with him as he drove to his next job, which was in a massive supermarket. I won't mention his actual employer, where he walks around and he picks out online orders and he puts them together and he gives them to people in their cars. And he's doing that until 10:30 p.m. at night. He doesn't see his daughter on those days. And he actually has a Ring bell in his lounge, one of those little videos, so that he can just peek in on his daughter, see how she's doing. She's being looked after by her mum. And what was interesting is this guy, I mean, I say working class. I think I'd describe him as middle class. His first job is not badly paid at all. But he said, look, I want my lifestyle to include being able to eat out, take my family for a meal out. I want to be able to go on holiday. He was also talking about whether he could actually get his daughter into private school. He was saying they'd applied for a load of scholarships. So it's middle class people as well who are feeling this squeeze. How badly is that likely to be affecting the Trump administration?
I think it is the main issue that the Trump administration has to deal with right now. I mean, as the stories that we're hearing from the groups and the stories you mentioned show, affordability is a really, really tangible problem for people. They can all talk about the ways in which they have been impacted by higher costs, particularly at the moment, I would note sort of gas bills. That comes up a lot.
Petrol,
so,
as we call it in the UK.
Yes, petrol and gas. The reality is that means that it's quite a difficult thing to sort of message your way out of. Like you actually need to show some form of delivery. Bear in mind that Trump ran in 2024 on an inflationary message against Joe Biden. Like this is something where Trump needs to start showing some delivery. Otherwise, people are going to start putting the blame on this at his administration. And if you think about the way that Trump has talked about affordability, he has consistently said that he inherited a lot of the problems that he's faced. What's changing now, I think, is it's just been too long for that to still work in some starts. So there's been too many interventions that people know have had affordability impacts for that to be a message that will withstand the test of time. So Iran, tariffs a little bit less so, but still people can put the blame of these things at Trump's door, and they will increasingly do so. And that's why it's going to be such a critical deciding factor when it comes to the midterms. And a big part of it will come down to whether Democrats can land that message, whether Democratic candidates can say, this is Trump's affordability crisis, and we have a solution for that.
Yeah, I mean, on it, I thought there was a bit of a divide between those who were retired and were feeling the pinch a little bit less, and who were basically saying, we think there is an argument for Iran and we think it's worth it to pay those slightly higher prices, and those who were working, who I actually thought were being a bit polite. Like I got the impression they were angrier about Iran, the Iran war, than they were quite saying. There was a woman there who we heard from, Sabrina, who was working, who gave Donald Trump an 8 out of 10, a black woman in Georgia, interestingly, is going to vote Democratic in the state races, but loved Donald Trump or very much liked him, not quite a 10 out of 10, who was basically saying, I just don't want us to get bothered in other people's businesses. I really want everyone to just focus on the here and now. Do you just overall think that this, therefore, is what is pushing the popularity down, particularly among independent voters?
I think so. I mean, it's interesting that you flagged the divide between pensioners and those in work. I think one of the things that's quite interesting that we've seen is younger people, millennials and below. They're the ones who historically they actually tend to be a little bit more positive about the affordability of things, about their own personal financial situation. That's taken a little bit of a dip recently, and actually that's starting to. And you've got to remember that Trump actually in 2024, one of the stories of how he won the vote in the way that he did was that younger voters came through for Trump in a way that they had not historically. So it could be that we're starting to see the pressure put on from younger voters. And if you look at what's happening on the Democratic side of things, the same sort of thing. Younger people are reaching for messages that are around affordability first and foremost, with people like Mamdani in New York. So this is shaping the politics. I think, therefore, it probably is a big part of the reason that we're seeing that decline, particularly among independent voters. It's worth remembering, though, just how many things happen all at once. So there's affordability, yes, but there is also the Iran conflict, and there was a lot of fallout over that too. There's also ICE, and many Republicans would say that ICE goes too far. So all of these things are happening at once. And what we're seeing is a line that tells us that Trump is getting a little bit less popular over time. It's quite hard to unpick all these things, but it is notable that when you sit down with swing voters in Georgia who are going to be really, really important in this election, they're talking about their bills.
They are indeed, although one of them, the one who I went and spent the next day with, Michael, also said he doesn't think he's getting the answers from Democrats. We'll come back to that. But I do just want to play a bit of the focus group where they were talking about the UK.
Okay, what about Trump's relationship with the UK? Have you seen much of that? Has anyone seen?
I haven't seen anything.
UK is upside down right now, very much so. And we've always, ever since that big war, we've always been aligned. And, we're watching their problems too, and they're hoping, I think in Great Britain, they're worried. They're worried. And Trump is using Great Britain as an example. See what happens when your government is taken over from the inside out. And Great Britain has to watch out.
What do you think people in Britain are worried about?
I think they're worried about their neighborhoods are being taken over. My daughter lived there for a long time, and I was over there many times. And you go just adjacent, and then there's a very rough neighborhood, very rough. I mean, we have some things like that here, but they're not right on your doorstep. And then the attitudes of people that want to take over Great Britain and take over their government. Their prime minister just resigned. And now what?
Did other people see that?
Yeah.
The UK's Prime Minister resigned today. Keir Starmer. Has anyone heard of Keir Starmer here?
Where's Margaret Thatcher when you need her?
Or Churchill.
Okay. Does anyone see anyone saw that Keir Starmer resigning?
I didn't see that
I
one.
saw it.
That's news to me, yeah.
That's news to anyone else? Okay.
Who is the Prime Minister that just resigned?
So there's a guy called Keir Starmer, who's the leader of the Labour Party. There's now going to be a new Prime Minister. One of the names suggested is a guy called Andy Burnham.
I haven't heard that one yet.
Okay. Staying with that relationship with the UK, Kenneth, what do you think about that? Do you think that the relationship with the UK is still good?
I think there's still a relationship. I don't know how good it is, because like I said, you don't know. The guy's like the wind, one day he's this way, the next day he might be going that way. So I don't know. It could be good today, and tomorrow he'd be like, we're done with the UK.
I thought it was, I didn't expect anyone, Seb, to know who Andy Burnham was, to be fair. But they really barely knew who Keir Starmer was, or at least some of them barely knew who Keir Starmer was. It's tricky, isn't it, for Andy Burnham as he becomes Prime Minister, if that's what indeed happens, as we expect. How does a foreign leader, a UK leader, deal with Donald Trump?
I think it's fair to say recently it's been shown that I don't think Donald Trump particularly knows who Andy Burnham is yet. And a lot of
a liberal guy. That's what he said. He's quite a liberal guy.
I think how Andy Burnham is perceived will be defined pretty rapidly over the next couple of months, in the same way as Starmer was. What we found when we're researching around the world is that, we talked about how Trump has a flaw to his approval ratings in America. That's not the case in Europe. That's not the case in Canada. That's not the case in UK. In fact, we've just seen those ratings going down and down and down. And it's starting to have a pretty big impact on the way people perceive America. It's seen as less of a reliable ally. People are starting to say things like, do you know what, it might be better to be closer to China than the US when it's under Donald Trump. It's meant that actually, if you were thinking about this strategically as a leader around the world, of a traditional ally of America, most of the polling would tell you right now it's pretty good to stand up to Donald Trump. We see less real cases of this because obviously it's more complicated than that is for leaders. There's a disconnect between the importance and significance of America as an economic partner and a defensive partner and what your public and voters are telling you to do, which is, I'd like to stand up to this guy who's saying strange things about the world order. I guess the place where we see it most clearly is Canada. That's the place where actually a lot of Mark Carney's popular support, and he is very popular at the moment, has come from the way that he has responded to Donald Trump. They shaped the election there in 2025, and now it's shaping some of the approval ratings that we're seeing there. So, it will be difficult because it's difficult to manage the conflicting priorities of winning the electorate and keeping the America on side as an ally. But the reality is, if you were listening to just the voters, you would probably start to fight back a little bit.
Yeah, which obviously we're seeing much more, and I suspect we'll see a bit of from Burnham. We've seen it from Georgia Maloney. We've seen it elsewhere in the world. But in terms of America itself, obviously, a lot of people think that he's made America more popular around the world. And one thing I found really interesting in all of this was that he has particular speaking points. He is a whatever else you think about Donald Trump, he's a very effective politician. He knows how to get his speaking points through. And at one point, we really heard from Stephanie, who is 81 years old, really loves Donald Trump. I think a lifelong Republican, was telling me actually, because I saw her the next day as well, how her daughter is a Democrat and they try to avoid the subject of politics. I thought it was really interesting how his messaging on fraud, on the pallets of cash that Barack Obama sent to Iran, according to Donald Trump, and actually on London had really, been persuasive to her.
Waste, fraud, theft, and abuse. Numbers of fraudulent people on Social Security.
Look at fraud. Billions of dollars being thrown away.
Barack Hussein Obama, who sent Iran pallets of cash.
Obama dumped all that money in Iran. Pallets of money.
I look at London and it's been so changed. Now they want to go to Sharia law.
And Trump is using Great Britain as an example. See what happens when your government is taken over from the inside.
And Seb, on that, is that an example of how effective he can be? And in particular on fraud, I've read some analysis that suggests because they've been accused of corruption, accusing the other side or accusing voters of fraud kind of muddies the air.
This is definitely an example of why Trump is an effective communicator. I mean, the sort of creation of bite-sized messages like the ones you're hearing, like they do cut through, and they have a particular power when it comes to areas where there's sort of low information. Actually, people don't have a great understanding of what London is like. Why would you? People in the UK don't have a great understanding of what Savannah's like. But that means that there's a pretty sort of fertile terrain for Trump to be putting messages like this in place. I think the question is, how do you pivot that and keep that effective messaging capabilities when it comes to things that people do experience in America? So like we talked about affordability, how do we get this sort of bite-sized message that people start to repeat and believe on something like affordability when they're still going to the shops and still feeling the pinch?
And do you think the Democrats are successfully getting any messaging like that through?
I think at the moment the Democrats are struggling to define exactly what sort of message they want to be putting forwards. I mean, one of the difficulties that the Democratic Party has is they're not sure what they're going to be running against next time. Like, is it some form of continuation of Trump? In which case, is there a sort of reason to be looking for a stability option or a sort of moderation option? Or is it going to be something entirely different that means that the Democrats could explore their own sort of form of more populist messaging, I suppose, for lack of a better word? So at the moment, no, but I think that just reflects that the Democratic Party doesn't clearly know who its leaders are and who should be its chief messengers. So you're getting quite a mixed bag of things coming out of the Democratic Party.
I mean, you can say that again. There are many, many tensions in the Democratic Party right now, including over the fact that Zohran Mamdani's candidates in New York, who some in the Democratic Party have been describing as not just socialists, they say they are communists, according to one senator, have been winning in New York. There's a massive debate about whether you need to be very radical or whether you need to be very centrist. I feel the same debate is coming also in the UK about where Andy Burnham should place himself. And I didn't feel much excitement for Democrats in the room. Interestingly, Georgia itself has this race which is going to pit a Trump-endorsed Senate candidate, Mike Collins, against the Democratic Senator, John Ossoff, who people have been very excited about. Some are talking about him as a possible presidential contender. In that focus group, Ed put to the group some of the better known names, and I did love some of their reactions.
I'm going to start with this man, JD Vance.
That's
the
our
vice
boyfriend.
president.
Now that's a drag queen who's married.
Would he make a president?
Would you say it again?
Would he make a
Would
good
you vote
president?
for him?
JD Vance.
I would vote for JD.
I might. And just, yeah.
Put your hands up if you would vote for JD Vance for
I think
for
he
president.
would.
I would.
Why do you think he'd make a good president?
I actually like JD's point of view. I think that JD is very balanced in making his decisions. He's not off the wall.
I'm a Trump fan, and Trump is in your face. With JD, you got to guess, like, is his wife going to tell him to vote this way? I don't see the strong personality from Vance like I do from Trump.
Thinking about the next election, so this would be in 2028. Kamala Harris. Would you vote for her in the next election? No. I noticed some of you, I think, voted for her last time, Michael.
Yeah, I would not. The only reason why I voted for her because her name was on the ticket. But again, and I didn't want to vote for Trump. But again, I think she was kind of like the Hail Mary pass at the end of that the way that the Democrats kind of went through that. I felt like we were cheated out of a primary. Biden said he wasn't going to run again, and he did.
Yep.
And he shouldn't have ran. I can agree with anyone on that.
By her?
She was a token.
She was beyond a token. She was a, yeah.
I've got another option for you guys.
Or giggle.
Marco Rubio, Secretary of State. Would you vote for him?
No.
As president?
Too
For
radical.
president?
Yes, imagine in 2028.
Pardon?
In 2028, would you vote for him as president?
Oh, if he's on the ticket, yes. I like him.
Okay. Hands up if you'd vote for him.
Out of the ones you've shown so far, Rubio is a possibility.
Okay, so can you put your hand up if you'd be tempted to vote for him?
I'd give him a maybe, yeah.
Okay.
Just a maybe.
I would have to hear
Just
some
a
more from
maybe.
you.
Okay, some maybes here. All right. Okay. Okay. What about this man?
Is that Rick?
No, that's Kevin.
That's Gavin Newsom.
Gavin Newsom, because the current
Oh,
governor of
no,
California.
not Mr. Newsom. That's a nutcase right there in
Andrew on
his
this
seat.
one.
You know, if that's who we have in the general, yes, I would. Is that who I'd want in the primary? No.
Okay.
Snowball's chance in hell.
Because I gotta admit, you need a slightly firmer hand. We kind of get ran over sometimes from other president administrations, and one thing I will say, you're not gonna punk Trump. That's one thing I will say for certain.
Exactly.
And I need that. We probably haven't had that since Reagan.
Okay.
Probably.
I'm just going on to the next one because of time. Pete Hegseth.
Oh my God, no, I'm ex-military and I can't stand that fool.
He used to be defense.
Now, are you specifically talking about president?
Yeah, so this is the 2028
28
election
presidential.
ticket. Yeah, would you be interested in voting for, could you put your hand up if you would be interested in voting
I'm going to let that one slide.
No hands?
Rubio's the only decent one you've shown so far.
Okay.
My opinion, though.
I've got another one here.
Hell yeah.
AOC, otherwise known as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Yes. Yes.
Anyone be interested in her on the ticket?
It's okay.
Only if we're allowed
Okay,
to stone her
fangirl.
first.
Okay. What about her?
I think she's principled. I think she's in the fight for the right reasons. She understands what we go through. I've supported her since the beginning of her career.
Oh my God, it's a Barbie doll with lipstick. Come on
Oh,
now.
she's not a Barbie doll. Come on.
So, Seb, I came away from there and I thought, ooh, they really don't like JD Vance, including Kim, who really, really loved Donald Trump. She literally snorted when Ed held up the picture of JD Vance. Do you hear that more broadly?
I think, yes, to an extent, JD Vance's popularity has changed quite a bit in the last year. And actually, I'm sure we'll talk about Rubio in a second, but the Republican next step for the Republican Party is becoming a Vance versus Rubio question. But I think that the terms of that debate aren't really set. Like, which of those is the Trump continuation candidate? Which of those is the change candidate? What's happened in the last 6 months or so is that Vance has gone from being a clear leader of the polls, likely as a representation of continuing the Trump agenda, to being pretty much neck and neck with Rubio. And I think it's happened for a number of reasons. I mean, he has much more exposure than Rubio does. There's many more reasons that people would find criticism because they just see him a little bit more. But he's also playing a difficult game here of how exactly do I present change or differentiation from Trump when Trump still does clearly, when we're looking at these primary results, have an impact with his endorsements and the way that he shapes the Republican agenda still. So yes, it's something we hear. It's something that is not yet resolved. I'm not sure exactly what will happen with Vance going forward.
And I think Donald Trump's enjoying it. There was one point, I think, in Mar-a-Lago where he asked a group of donors, who would you go for, Marco Rubio or JD Vance? And also the other day, I think someone asked him about all the gold furnishing that he's added to the White House and how a future president might feel about it. And he said, I think the Cubans really like gold, which was obviously a mention about Marco Rubio. And I thought it was interesting. They weren't like immediately cheering Marco Rubio, but almost everyone in the room, I think apart from Andrew, who's, green leaning, I would say, and otherwise will vote Democrat, put their hand up as thinking Rubio was okay. I mean, is he seen as a more kind of uniting figure?
So we're going to draw the difference between a focus group in a swing state and the country as a whole here by saying that I think when you look at national level polling for these two candidates, they're both basically as unpopular as one another. I mean, Vance has changed a lot in the last 6 months. Rubio has remained relatively steady, other than that he's gained, I think, when you put them in head-to-heads as opposed to evaluations on their own. But I mean, it is interesting to see these early signs that maybe actually, the brand that Vance has is becoming so Trump adjacent or problematic in its own right that actually they are starting to be able to put a hair between these two people who on most polling would look relatively similar in the way they're perceived.
I thought it was hilarious how much they disliked Pete Hegseth, including the Trump-loving veteran. What is it about Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, that gets a reaction like that?
I think Pete Hegseth is on the news for one thing and one thing only, and it's a war that is sometimes quite unpopular with people. And the way that he has been seen to communicate on that has not been particularly effective. Like, it's interesting that people have very, very different views to all these candidates who would probably want to be part of that same Trump brand that is sticky. That stickiness isn't there for anyone besides Trump. So actually, maybe what we're starting to see is that sort of approval decline that Trump has hits hardest some of the people who represent him but don't have the brand that he does.
Do you understand what it is that makes people love Trump so much?
I think Trump becomes a label that applies to many things that are going on in politics and makes a sort of easy heuristic judgment as to whether you like a thing or you do not. So, we can talk about, and you saw it in the group, there was a lot of nuance when it comes to how people feel about different things that have happened in the last 2 years, in the last 10 years. But when it comes to Trump, people have an answer immediately. Yes, I like him. No, I really don't like him. And I think all it is testament to just how much he has shaped politics, how much politics has become about what he is doing, what he thinks, what he just said. So I think it's chicken and egg as to why exactly Trump was able to do this. But the reality is that he has been able to do this, and there's just been a snowball since people have got into the frame of talking about Trump more than they've been talking about the things that Trump is doing. That's where politics has sort of got stuck, I suppose.
And meanwhile, the Democrats are thinking, do we need our Trump or do we need something different? I mean, it was really difficult to think, who do you test in the room? Because it's not clear yet who might be a Democratic challenger. Kamala Harris was put to them and obviously got a relatively negative reaction, although a number of people in the room said they'd voted for her. Gavin Newsom didn't go down all that well in this Georgia room. We can talk about that. And then there was AOC, and she got quite a divisive reaction, didn't she? One person, Andrew, loved her. I feel like, in a way, she represents this wider debate going on in the Democratic Party. Is there any sense yet about whether the party has more chance of winning with a kind of more Trump-like figure, if that's the right word for it, somebody who takes a kind of more, I don't think extreme is the right word, but, a more leftist position to appeal to, voters' sentiments like Andrew's?
I think what's happened in the last 12 months with people like Mamdani in New York City is that they've been able to define that leftist side of the Democratic Party and what that looks like in a way that I think the more moderate or centrist side, as you might call it, in the Democratic Party has not been able to get that definition. So in a way, the momentum is behind them. They are putting words to this. And the critical thing I think that's helped is that they are talking about affordability. That is the side of the Democratic Party that is talking about affordability now. We know that that's the underpinning issue. We know that Zoran was able to win with an affordability message. Can they take that to...
Could a character like him win in Pennsylvania?
That's the biggest challenge. These are things that they're not tested outside of areas that are deep, deep blue. Yes, Mamdani's 3 candidates won primaries in New York City. That's still New York City. And what the Republican Party is hoping at this point is that they can define that affordability movement as a communist movement, which we know is very unpopular among voters, before it gets any wind in its sails outside of these deep blue areas. So whether it can win or not, I think it's a low information zone at the moment. Actually, Mamdani polls relatively well, but it's because a lot of people don't know their views on him yet. And if Trump and the Republican Party can get ahead of Mamdani in defining what he stands for and, talk about him as a socialist and a communist and a radical, then it's going to be very difficult for him to claw back that by talking about his affordability agenda on a more general scale. So, that is the crisis facing the Democratic Party. And we're so far out now at the moment from Democrats actually defining what they're running against that there's a lot of room for these things to be defined before we get to sort of the reality of picking an option in 2028.
And just finally, I'm sure you will be cautious about predictions, but as a pollster, you read loads of research, you listen to voters all the time. And we've got a situation right now where Trump's picks are winning primaries and are going up against Democrats in the midterm elections. How bad do you think it's going to be for Donald Trump's Republican Party? Do you think they'll lose control of the House? Do you think they'll lose control of the Senate? Or do you think that sticky support for him might surprise people?
I don't know if you're going to be able to force me into an answer here. But I mean, most of the polling, yes, it says that the wind is in the Democrats' sails, right? If Trump's approval ratings are down and on a generic ballot polling, Democrats are up. But we've been here before. We really have been here before. And we know that these things can turn around. We know that so many of these elections are really, really close. I think, if anything, this election is a really, really useful information case for what might happen in 2028, because it tells us about the strengths of Trump's endorsement. It tells us about whether that brand has withstood quite a turbulent 2 years of his administration. So I view this as a great learning opportunity. I'm not sure if I'm comfortable making a prediction at this point as to how it's all going to go, but I look forward to finding out, I suppose.
And when you say the wind is in the Democrat sails, is that wind entirely created by Donald Trump?
Yeah, maybe it's fairer to say that the wind is up against the Republican sails right now. They've got a harder battle to put forward because they have to own the affordability crisis now rather than challenge it. That is always a difficult position to be in. That's a crisis that's facing political leaders around the world. They're all facing similar challenges. How do you stand for the thing that people feel is not working rather than say that's not working, it's time for change? That's what the Republicans have to do. Whether Trump can reconjure the sort of magic that he did in 2016 and 2024 is the key question of 2026's midterms.
Seb Wride, thank you very much for joining me. I think that is all we have time for today. I really appreciate Public First giving us all that additional information. I will be back next week, still in Washington, DC, with Matt back in London.